My brothers, my sisters, I come not with the ease of silence, but with the thunder of truth. We have sung the songs of Zion, lifted our hands in the sanctuary, dropped our coins in golden plates and called it holy. But what if, just what if, that which we thought was sacred was built on misunderstanding? What if our giving has become a guilted transaction instead of a grateful offering? I say to you now with trembling voice and upright spine, tithing is not salvation. Tithing is not holiness. Tithing is not righteousness. It is not a command to the broken widow. It is not a demand to the mother with 3 jobs and 4 mouths to feed. God does not auction blessings. He does not trade miracles for money. He does not keep score with your coins. Tithing in its misused form is a sin. My sweet child, I have lived long enough to watch the seasons roll by like waves against the rocks, and I've heard the cries of many hearts wounded, not by the world, but by the weight of religion. And I must tell you, with trembling lips and a soul aged in wisdom, that something sacred has been defiled, tithing. Once the song of generosity, once the heartbeat of a thankful soul, has been dressed in chains and handed over to greed. It did not start this way. No, it began in quiet reverence. A gift laid down, not to impress, not to boast, but to say, Lord, I am grateful. It was the fruit of fields, the sweat of labor, the harvest of love. It was a man giving, not because he had to, but because he wanted to, because his heart beat with the rhythm of divine appreciation. But time has a way of changing the hands that hold holy things. Now I have seen with eyes both weary and wide open how this beautiful act has been twisted. No longer a gift, no longer a love letter to the Lord. Now it is a law, a command barked from pulpits clad in fine cloth. Men preaching not from humility but from hunger, not the hunger of the Spirit, but the hunger of status, power, and polished shoes. They say, give, or you are cursed. They say, God will not bless you if you don't sow into this soil. They say, 10%, or else you are stealing from God himself. And so trembling women clutch purses that should feed their children. And old men, hands blistered from decades of work, give away their rent. Not out of joy, not out of abundance, but out of fear. This is not giving. This is coercion. And I tell you, with the fire of 1,000 prophets and the softness of a mother's lullaby, God does not operate in fear. He does not twist arms. He does not turn his back on the poor because their wallets are empty. He does not measure faith by dollars dropped in a basket. No, my dear one. He measures faith by love. But somewhere along the way, we began to treat the tithe like a tax, a heavenly fee, a divine charge. And pulpits turned into payment booths. They quote Malachi, wagging fingers with fervor. Will a man rob God? Yes, child, they quote it, but they do not explain it. They do not tell you this was spoken to priests in a broken covenant, to a people who had grown cold in their ritual. Not to a single mother sitting in the back pew with borrowed shoes. They do not tell you that Jesus came not to enforce laws written in stone, but to fulfill them, to replace transaction with transformation, to shift the focus from money to mercy, from obligation to open-hearted giving. But mercy doesn't pay for marble floors. Mercy doesn't finance fountains in foyers. So the message must be rewritten. Tithing becomes a business, and the house of the Lord becomes a brand. Now, we are told that if we just give enough, our sickness will vanish, our debts will dissolve, our dreams will be delivered wrapped in ribbon. Do you hear me? This is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is the gospel of manipulation. This is not the faith of our grandmothers, who knelt on wooden floors and sang, Precious Lord, with empty pockets and full hearts. This is a lie dressed in silk. We must reclaim the truth. Giving is good. Giving is holy. Giving is the melody of a soul in tune with the divine. But it must come from love, not from fear, not from pressure, not from a spiritual sales pitch. Let us tell the truth and shame the devil. There are churches, oh yes, there are some, where the poor are pressured and the rich are praised, where giving becomes a measure of worth, and members are ranked not by their fruit, but by their funds. In these places, the gospel is lost beneath a flood of fundraising, and Jesus, the humble carpenter, is turned into a cash collector. But he will not be mocked. The same Jesus who sat with sinners, who walked with lepers, who fed 5,000 without a collection plate, that Jesus still walks among us. And he is weeping not because people give, but because people are being forced to give, told they are lesser if they do not, told their faith is broken if their pockets are light. That is not divine. That is dangerous. I know, child. This is a heavy truth. But the truth, like a songbird, must fly free. And when you hear it, really hear it, something inside you begins to breathe again. You are not obligated to buy God's favor. You are not required to pay for his love. You are already loved, already seen, already chosen. So give, yes, give. But give as your heart leads. Give when joy bubbles up like a spring in your soul. Give when you are moved by compassion, not compulsion. And if you cannot give, if your cupboards are bare and your bank account is gasping, know this: God understands. He sees your heart, not your hand, your faith. Not your finances. Let the preachers preach, but let us return to truth. Let us teach the children that tithing is not a ticket to heaven, that giving is not a bribe for blessings, but a river of love that flows from the well of gratitude. And when we finally grasp this, when we no longer give because we are told to, but because we want to, then the church will rise again. Not in wealth, but in wonder. Not in gold, but in glory. Not in fear, but in faith. And oh, how beautiful she will be. Let me sit with you a while, dear heart. Let me speak soft words that carry the weight of thunder and the breath of truth. Come, lean in, close, not to hear me, but to hear the echo of the truth your spirit already knows. There is a lie that has wrapped itself in the fabric of gospel, and it walks proudly down the aisles of churches too grand to be humble. It wears a preacher's smile. It dances in sermons. It grins from gilded offering envelopes. And this lie, this cruel lie, says that God's blessings are for sale. But I rise now as one who has known hunger and wholeness, silence and song, to say plainly and profoundly, God does not sell his blessings. He does not count your coins to decide if you are worthy. He does not weigh your bank account before sending his angels. He does not auction his mercy to the highest bidder. No, no. The God I know, the God who woke you up this morning, who clothed your soul in grace and kissed your breath back into being, he is not a merchant. He is not a peddler of miracles. He is not a business partner waiting for your investment before he performs his wonders. But we have made him look like that, haven't we? We've turned the sacred sanctuary into a showroom. We've hung up blessings like garments with price tags. We've said, if you give this amount, God will heal you. If you sow into this ministry, your child will return home. If you tithe faithfully, God will break every chain. And though those words may sound sweet, their roots are bitter. Because what happens, child, when the woman with nothing to give falls sick? What happens when the man who gave his last still loses his job? What happens when the desperate mother gives the little she has and still watches her son drift away? Do we say God ignored her because her envelope was too light? Do we say her faith was too small, her giving too sparse? Oh, shame on such thinking. Shame on such doctrine that turns our Father into a financier. God is not a vending machine. Drop in $1, get your miracle. He is not your landlord. Pay your tithe or be evicted from his favor. He is not waiting in some high office, tallying your generosity like a taxman. He is a father, and a father gives because he loves. A father blesses because it brings him joy. A father does not withhold hugs until a child pays rent. And let us not forget the greatest blessing that ever walked this earth, Jesus. He came without a price tag. He healed without a donation. He fed without asking for a fee. He wept, bled, and died, not for the wealthy, not for the tithers, but for all. There was no toll to touch the hem of his garment. There was no offering required to break bread with him. He gave freely, openly, lavishly, because that is the nature of grace. And yet how far we've drifted from that holy truth. We've told people that if they don't tithe, they're cursed. We've scared the elderly into giving what they don't have. We've guilted young believers into emptying their wallets so they can activate their blessing. We've taught them that heaven is a storehouse and the key is their seed. But, beloved, heaven is not a storehouse. Heaven is a home. And in a home, blessings flow not because of what you bring, but because of who you are to the one who owns it. You are God's child. And his love is not a contract, it's a covenant. His blessings are not bought, they're breathed. Not earned, they're given. Not priced, they're priceless. Now hear me, I do not say this to discourage giving. No. Giving is beautiful. Giving, when it springs from the well of gratitude, is a holy thing. Giving, when it flows like a river from a thankful heart, is music to God's ears. But giving must never be manipulated. It must never be twisted into a tool of shame or fear. It must never be the bait in the trap of false doctrine. I've sat in churches where the man behind the pulpit said, "If you don't give right now, you're blocking your own blessing." And I watch widows whisper apologies as they place their last coins on the altar. I saw children look at their mothers with hungry eyes, while preachers promise miracles in exchange for money. And my heart broke, because I knew then, as I know now, this is not God. God is not that cruel. God is not that petty. God does not require payment to move in your life. He is moved by compassion. He is stirred by faith. He is present in your pain, whether you are rich or poor. Let the rich give, yes. Let the blessed pour out their blessings. But let no man, no woman, make you feel unworthy of God's goodness, because your pockets are light, because your heart is what God sees, and your faith is what he responds to, and your need is what draws him close. You cannot buy his love. You cannot purchase his presence. You cannot tiptoe your way into favor through financial transactions. You are already loved, already known, already embraced. And that, my dear, is the greatest blessing of all. So walk tall, even if your purse is empty. Sing loud, even if your hands have nothing to offer. Pray boldly, even if you gave nothing last Sunday, because you are the offering. And to the one who holds the stars in his hand, you are enough. There comes a time in the soul of every person when truth rises up like a river, pressing against the walls of silence, refusing to be still. And today I say what many have whispered behind closed doors, what the broken have cried behind church pews, what the weary have carried like invisible chains. To take from the poor in the name of God is not just wrong, it is sin. It is sin dressed in robes and collars. It is sin hiding behind pulpits and titles. It is sin with a Bible in one hand and a basket in the other, demanding sacrifice from those who barely have breath. I've walked the streets where grandmothers held empty purses but full hearts, and still felt ashamed because they had nothing to give on Sunday morning. I have watched young mothers rock hungry babies in sanctuaries laced with guilt, made to believe that their lack of money was a lack of faith. And I have seen men in fine suits preach prosperity while widows in tattered coats shivered in the back row. This, child, is not the church Jesus built. The Christ I know did not build a kingdom on the backs of the poor. He walked among them, sat with them, broke bread with them, and when the woman with 2 small coins dropped her offering into the temple treasury, he did not exalt the amount. He exalted the heart. He didn't demand more from her. He didn't pull her aside and tell her, "You're robbing God." He honored her sacrifice, then walked away with his hands still open, still giving, never taking. But today I have seen a different spirit moving through the church, a spirit that does not come from heaven. It is the spirit of exploitation. It twists scripture like a wet rag and wrings it out over dry souls, desperate for hope. It tells the struggling man, if you don't tithe, your life will fall apart. It tells the hurting woman, God won't heal your child unless you give. It sells fear with a smile. It packages shame in gold-trimmed offering envelopes. And all the while, God weeps. Oh yes, he weeps, because the same God who fed Elijah by the brook, the same God who turned 2 fish and 5 loaves into a feast, the same God who told the rich young ruler to give to the poor, not to the temple coffers, but to the poor, is watching us now, and he sees what we have become. He sees churches with $1 million sound systems while people outside the door are starving. He sees pastors driving cars that cost more than homes while single mothers count pennies for bus fare. He sees building funds that never build anything but pride. And he asks, where is my love? Where is my justice? For what kind of house is this where the broken must pay to be healed? What kind of table is this where the hungry must sow a seed before they're fed? What kind of faith is this where mercy has a price tag? It is not the gospel. It is not grace. It is not God. It is robbery. It is spiritual abuse. And it is sin. But you must understand, this sin is slick. It is clever. It wears the perfume of tradition. It sings in perfect harmony with choir voices and blends in with holy hands raised. It knows how to disguise itself as blessing and favor and prosperity. But peel back the layers, and you will find it feeding on the desperation of the poor. You will find it taking from those who came to receive. You will find it demanding bread from those who have none. And let me tell you something, my darling. God is not pleased. He is not honored when we pressure the poor to give what they do not have. He is not glorified when we turn giving into a test and not a testimony. He is not worshipped when pulpits become podiums for profit. He is found in the small, quiet acts of love, the whispered prayer over a grieving widow, the hot meal given without expectation, the open arms that say, come sit and rest. You owe me nothing. That is the kingdom. That is the gospel. That is the heart of God. We must return to the truth. We must stop measuring devotion by dollars. Stop equating spirituality with spending. Stop manipulating the vulnerable in the name of ministry. Because when the church becomes a place where the rich are celebrated and the poor are shamed, we are no longer the body of Christ. We are just a business. And God did not send his son to build a corporation. He sent him to save souls. I remember an old woman in Georgia. Her name was Miss Lily. Didn't have much but a tin roof and a gentle smile. She walked to church every Sunday in shoes with worn-out soles. But her spirit was rich with kindness. And one day I heard a preacher say, if you don't give, you're cursed. Come close, dear one. Sit in the quiet where the Spirit speaks, not in thunder, not in applause, but in the hush of understanding. I want to take you back, not just through pages of Scripture, but through the footprints of a man who walked dusty roads, not marble halls. A man who wore no robe of riches, who held no ledger in his hand. His name was Jesus. And child, hear me well. Yes, he taught. Yes, he healed. Yes, He fed the thousands. Yes, he raised the dead. Yes, he changed the world. But not once did he ask for a tithe. And if that startles you, good, it should. Because the truth has a way of shaking the walls we've built around comfort. It stirs us like wind through dry leaves. It calls out across generations, saying, return to the way of love. Return to the way of truth. Jesus, our teacher, our Savior, our soul lifter. He didn't stand at the entrance of the synagogue with a basket. He didn't charge a coin to touch his robe. He didn't set a price for his miracles. He didn't say, blessed are the tithers. He said, blessed are the poor in spirit. He didn't say, give 10% and I'll give you favor. He said, freely you have received, freely give. You see, when Jesus looked upon the crowd, he didn't see pockets. He saw people. He saw hunger in their eyes, not just for food, but for kindness, for compassion, for something real in a world that had turned holy things into currency. Oh, the temple in those days was much like the churches of today, full of tradition, full of rules, full of money changers who thought God lived in gold. And Jesus, he didn't just avoid their ways, he overturned their tables, he turned their prophets into dust. He stood in righteous anger and declared, you have turned my Father's house into a den of thieves. He didn't say that to the sinners outside. He said that to the leaders inside. Jesus was no fundraiser. He was no treasurer. He wasn't a religious businessman. He was a servant. He didn't build his ministry on donation. He built it on devotion. He didn't live in a mansion. He had no place to lay his head. He didn't own a horse or a chariot. He walked. And when he entered Jerusalem, he came on a borrowed donkey. Yet even with nothing in his hand, he gave everything. So why then have we made ministry into money? Why have we crafted a gospel that depends on cash instead of compassion? Why have we made the tithe the measure of a man's faith, when Jesus himself never asked for it? I've seen it, child. I've seen the guilt, the shame, the fear that says if I don't tithe, I'm cursed. I've seen the preacher pounding the pulpit, declaring promises with a price tag. Give, and you'll be healed. Give, and you'll be promoted. Give, and God will move. But let me tell you something tender and true. God does not move by money. He moves by mercy. He moves by grace. He moves by the cry of the heart, not the clinking of coins. Jesus proved it with every step. He saw a widow give 2 mites, just 2, and he said she gave more than all the rich men combined. Why? Not because of the amount, but because of the love behind it. He healed 10 lepers and asked for no offering. He fed the 5,000 and passed no plate. He brought Lazarus back from the dead and never said, sow a seed first. Because to Jesus, giving was never transactional. It was transformational. It was about generosity of spirit, not requirement of law. And yes, the tithe was part of the old covenant, a law given under Moses for the support of the Levitical priesthood. But when Jesus came, he fulfilled the law, not just with words, but with his life. He tore the veil. He became the high priest. He opened the door to grace. And he never once commanded his followers to tithe. He told them to give, yes, to give generously, to give joyfully, to give to the poor, to care for the widow, the orphan, the stranger, but never to give out of obligation, never out of fear, never to unlock a blessing that was already theirs. You don't need to buy what God already gave. You don't need to pay for what Christ already paid. You don't need to tithe your way into favor when you are already loved. So let us ask ourselves with courage and honesty, if Jesus didn't collect tithes, why are we doing it in his name? If he never taxed the broken to receive his love, why are we taxing the poor to maintain our buildings? If the Savior served without price, Why do we place price tags on everything sacred? Could it be perhaps that we have traded the simplicity of Jesus for the complexity of systems? Could it be that we have drifted from the gospel and wrapped ourselves in the comfort of control? Ah, chav, the truth can be uncomfortable, but it is also freeing, because when we release ourselves from the burden of legalistic giving, we begin to walk in the joy of true generosity. We no longer give to be seen. We give because we see. See the needs of others. See the beauty of sharing. See the God who gave us everything with no conditions. Jesus never collected tithes because he wasn't building an empire. He was building a kingdom where the poor are blessed, where the meek inherit the earth, where the humble are exalted, and where love, not law, leads the way. So let the churches teach giving, not out of duty, but out of delight. Let the people give, not because they are afraid of a curse, but because they are overwhelmed by grace. Let the pastors lead, not with pressure, but with example. And let us remember this always. The Son of God walked this earth with no pockets, no paycheck, no tithe collection, but in his empty hands he held healing. In his open arms he held salvation, and with his very life he gave us everything we would ever need. That, dear heart, is the gospel. That is the truth. That is Jesus. Grace, my dear, is not a wage to be earned. It is a gift pure, undeserved, divine. A gift that arrives like the morning sun without a price tag, without condition, and certainly without a receipt. Grace is the breath of God blown into our weary lungs, the touch of mercy on a trembling hand, the song that says, "You are enough, even now." But Lord knows some folks have tried to sell what heaven gives for free. They dress salvation in economics. They lace redemption with dues. They build their altars on ledgers and their pulpits on profit, telling the people that giving, yes, giving, is the gate to glory. The 10% is the price of peace, the currency of Christ, the toll for traveling the narrow way. But I say, no, because the Jesus I know does not barter with blessings. He doesn't demand payment before he pours out his love. He doesn't ask for a dime to deliver a soul. No, the Jesus I know stretches out his hands, nail-pierced and free, and says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Not come if you can pay, not come if you've tithed, not come if your pockets are full, just come. Oh, how we've complicated what God made so simple. We've built spiritual toll booths where there should be bridges. We've turned the living waters into bottled goods for sale. We've taken the word grace and covered it in price tags, when God meant for it to rain down like manna in the desert, freely, daily, faithfully. Grace is not a reward for the righteous. It is a lifeline for the lost. It is not given in return for gold or silver, but in response to need. The need to be seen, to be loved, to be held by something greater than ourselves. And yet too many voices in the church have turned this sacred gift into a spiritual transaction. Give, and God will give to you. Sow a seed and reap a blessing. Tithe your way to transformation. But what of the widow who has no seed to sow? What of the homeless man who owns no percent to part with? What of the single mother choosing between food and electricity? Do you mean to tell me that heaven is closed to them unless they pay? That mercy sits behind a locked door waiting for a financial key? No, my love, that is not grace. That is greed wrapped in gold. That is man's doctrine, not God's desire. Let us return to the well. Let us remember the Samaritan woman. She brought no coin, no tithes, no offering, just her weary heart and her thirsty soul. And Jesus didn't charge her for a sip. He offered her living water, no strings attached, no conditions, no requirement but this: believe. Believe. That is the foundation of salvation. Not giving, not earning, not striving, just believing that God is who he says he is. Believing that Jesus lived, died, and rose again for you. Believing that his grace is enough, more than enough, to cover every sin, every scar, every shortcoming. And when that belief takes root, when grace grips your heart, something beautiful begins to grow. You start to give not because you must, but because you can. Not because you're afraid, but because you're free. Not to earn favor, but to reflect the favor already given. That's the kind of giving heaven delights in, the kind that flows from love, not law, from gratitude, not guilt, from joy, not judgment. I've seen that kind of giving, child. I've seen a poor man drop his last dollar into a stranger's hand and walk away smiling, not expecting a miracle in return. I've seen a woman bring bread to her neighbor's door, not because she wanted a blessing, but because she was already blessed. I've seen saints give with their hands, their hearts, their time, their presence, because grace had so filled them, they couldn't help but pour it out. That is the foundation Jesus laid. Not a system of spiritual taxation, not a legalistic ladder to climb, but a wide, open gate, a highway called grace, paved not with coins, but with compassion. You see, if salvation could be bought, the rich would be saved and the poor would perish. If grace was for sale, heaven would be a country club and the cross would be a cash register. But that's not the gospel. That's not our hope. That's not our Jesus. Our Jesus overturned the tables of those who turned faith into finance. Our Jesus fed thousands without charging a fee. Our Jesus touched the untouchable, loved the unlovable, forgave the unforgivable. And he never once asked for an offering before performing a miracle. He paid the price in full, not with gold but with blood, not with silver but with sacrifice. And now that grace is yours, not to rent, not to lease, but to live in, freely, fully, forever. So don't let anyone tell you you must pay for what God has given. Don't let fear masquerade as faith. Don't let manipulation wear the mask of ministry. Instead, walk in the truth. Stand in the light. Rest in the arms of grace. And if you choose to give, let it be from the overflow of a heart that has been loved by a king who asks for nothing but gives everything. Remember this always. Grace cannot be measured, it cannot be sold, it cannot be earned, and it most certainly cannot be bought. It is the gift of God for the broken, for the weary, for the poor, for the rich, for you, for me. And that, child, is the only foundation strong enough to save a soul.